Out of my way, toy soldier. This is a working key, not your little parade ground. That was the first thing the captain ever said to me, and he said it loud, so the dockhands would hear, so the whole gray morning at the foot of the King's Stair would know that he was a man who said what he liked to men in red. I had been on the key post since before the gulls woke. I did not move. I did not look at him. I looked as I had been trained to look at the middle distance over the harbor, where the masts of his ship stood up out of the mist like a burnt forest, and I let him say it. I should tell you where this was, because the where is half the story. They call it the lower quay, at Vendry Reach, under the seawall of the king's house, a long working wharf of black wet stone where the tide comes up green and the cranes lean over the water like patient herons. The palace stands above it, all gilded iron and pale stone, and the people who come to gawk at the changing of the guard never come down here. Down here is rope and tar and fish and the cold smell of the deep harbor. And down here at the gate of the inner basin, where the king's own stores come in and out under the king's own seal, they post a sentry of the household. That morning, the sentry was me. My name does not matter much to the telling. The men called me Hale. I had stood on that quay through 4 winters, and I had learned what a quay teaches a still man, that the sea does not argue and does not hurry, and that everything which floats will, in time, come to the stone and be weighed. I believed that the way some men believe in luck. I had reason to, before the morning was out. The captain's name was Roderick Vane, and he wanted you to know it. He had it painted in gold on the stern of his ship and stamped on his crates and worked into the buckle of his coat, and he wore the coat open in the cold, so the buckle would catch the light. He owned 3 vessels and the lease of 2 warehouses and, he believed, a fair portion of the quay itself. And that morning he had come ashore in a hurry with a barge-load of goods. He did not want looked at, and the only thing standing between his goods and the inner basin was a toy soldier of the docks who would not move. You hear me? He came up the stone to me close, his boots loud. I've a tide to catch and 40 crates to land, and you're standing on my gate like a painted post. Step aside and let my men through. I said nothing. That is the first thing they never understand, the loud men. They think the silence is fear or stupidity or some trick of the trade, a soldier too dull to answer. It is none of those things. The silence is the post. A sentry of the household does not bandy words at his station. He keeps the station, and the station speaks for him. The gate to the inner basin was shut and barred behind me, and it would open for the harbor master's writ and the customs seal and nothing else. Not for gold on a stern, not for a loud voice, not for 40 crates and a captain in a hurry. Vane did not know that yet, or he knew it and thought himself the exception, which is the same thing, only worse. Look at him, he said, turning to his men, to the dockhands who had stopped their work to watch, the way men always stop to watch a thing that might turn dangerous. Look at the king's finest. They dress him up in the wool and the brass and the great furry hat, and they stand him on a wharf to frighten the seagulls. A few of his own crew laughed, because a man laughs at his captain's jokes the way he bails his captain's boat to keep his place in it. The dockhands did not laugh. The dockhands knew the key. Does it talk? Vane said, leaning to me. Or do they take the tongue out when they give you the hat? I kept my eyes on the masts. Behind that unmoving face I will tell you exactly what I was thinking, because a man can think a great deal while he holds a post, and the holding is the harder for it. I was thinking that he had come ashore on the first of the ebb, hours before the customs house opened, when the harbor was thin of officers and thick of fog. I was thinking that a man with an honest cargo lands it in daylight and pays his dues and does not care who looks. And I was thinking that the barge tied off below my gate was riding very low in the water for a load of what his papers, when his foreman waved them at me, called salt and dry cordage. Salt and dry cordage do not ride a barge low. I have stood on that quay through 4 winters. I know what salt rides like, and I know what cordage rides like, and I knew what that barge was not carrying. But I said nothing because it was not yet mine to say. The post has an order to it. The sentry holds the gate, the harbor master weighs the writ, the customs officer breaks the seal and looks in the crate. Each man to his station, and the chain holds because each link holds, and the day a sentry decides to be the customs officer too is the day the whole thing comes apart. So I held my gate and I waited for the chain, and I let Captain Roderick Vane call me a painted post in front of the morning. He had not finished. Loud men never finish, they only run out of new things and start again at the beginning. Right, he said and clapped his gloved hands together, brisk, businesslike, a man done being amused. Enough, foreman, bring the crates up. We'll go round him, he's not going to do anything. They're not allowed to do anything. He said that last with real relish, leaning it at me like a knife he'd found in his own pocket. That's the joke of you, isn't it? You'll stand there and take it. You'll stand there while I land my cargo over your king's own seal, and you'll do precisely nothing, because nothing is the one thing you're trained for. His foreman, a broad, slow man named Crew with a tally book under his arm, looked at me, and then looked at his captain and did not move. "Crew," said Vane. "Captain," said Crew, "the gate's barred." "Then unbar it." "It's the king's gate, Captain, the seal's on it." And there it was, the first crack in the morning, the first man on Vane's own crew who knew the key better than his master did. I marked Crew for it. A foreman who knows the gate is a man who has read the key true, and a man who reads true is a man you can build a clean morning on when the time comes. Vane only flushed. "I'll have your book," he told Crew, soft and ugly. "I'll have it by noon. You answer to me, not to a strip of wax and a soldier in a costume." And he shouldered past his own foreman and came right up to my gate, right up to me, near enough that I could smell the salt and the night's drink on him, and he put one gloved hand flat on the barred gate beside my shoulder, as if to push it himself. I will tell you what I did then, because it is the whole of what I did all morning, and it is the thing the loud men can never quite believe. I came to attention. Not a lurch, not a start, a single clean movement, boots together, rifle to the shoulder, the way it is done, the way it has been done on that key for 200 years before there was a Roderick Vane to put his glove on it. And I looked at him. For the first time that morning I took my eyes off the masts and I looked the captain full in the face, and I let him see that the post was awake and that the gate would not open for his hand. It is a small thing to come to attention and look a man in the eye. It is nothing at all. A child could do it, but you would be astonished what it does to a loud man who has spent his life being looked away from, to be looked at squarely, without heat, without fear, by a man who will plainly stand there until the tide goes out and comes in again. Vane took his hand off the gate. He did it slowly, to make it look like he had meant to all along, but he took it off. "You'll regret this," he said. "I know people in that house up there." He jerked his chin at the palace on the wall above us, gold and pale in the lifting fog. "I'll have you off this key by the week's end." I should tell you that this was not the first morning Roderick Vane had landed a low-riding barge in the thin gray hour. The key knew him. That was the trouble with the key. It knew him too well, and knowing a man and stopping him are two different things. Twice that winter I had watched him bring goods ashore at the wrong hour through the outer wharf, where there is no inner gate and no king's seal and no sentry, only a tired tide clerk who counts crates and does not weigh them. Twice I had watched, and twice it had not been mine to act, because the outer wharf is not my post, and a sentry who leaves his gate to chase a wrong he was not set to guard has abandoned the right he was. The post is not the whole of the harbor. The post is the gate. You hold the gate and you trust the chain to hold the rest, and on the mornings the chain does not hold, you carry it like a stone in the chest and you hold your gate anyway. So Vane had grown bold. A man grows bold who has been let through twice. He had come, this third morning, to the inner gate itself, to the king's own seal. Because the outer wharf had taught him, there was no line on the whole quay he could not walk over if he walked over it loud enough. He had come to the wrong gate. But he did not know that yet, and neither that morning did I, not for certain. I only knew salt does not ride low, and that I would hold the gate until a man with a scale could tell me what did. There was a boy on the quay that morning, a dockhand named Tobin, 16 perhaps, new to the whetstone, with the raw hands of a lad in his first winter of real work. Vane turned on him now because a loud man who cannot move the wall will always look for the softest thing nearby to push instead. "You," he said, "boy, you want work this winter. Steady work, a captain's wages, not the few coppers they throw you for hauling another man's rope." Tobin went still the way a young animal goes still. "Then come and lay your hands to my crates and help my men carry them round this painted post, and I'll mark you down as one of mine, and you'll not want for a berth come spring. Or stand there with the soldier and the clerk and be poor and proud and useless your whole life. Your choice, boy. Quick now." I have thought about that too in the years since, that of everything Vane did that morning, the worst of it was not what he said to me. I am a grown man in the king's wool. His words broke on me like the harbor on the wall. The worst of it was that, the wall having failed him, he reached past the wall for a boy of 16 and tried to buy his first winter's character for the price of a captain's wages. That is what the loud men do when the still man holds. They go looking for someone too young to know that the easy way is a hook with a wage on it. I did not move and I did not speak. The post does not bandy words, not even for a boy. But I will tell you I have never in 4 winters wanted so badly to turn my head and say a thing to a lad, and never did a thing harder than keep my eyes on the masts and trust him to find the answer in himself. He found it. Tobin looked at the captain and looked at the crates riding low, and looked at the barred gate I stood on, and he said, not loud, not brave, just a boy telling the truth because he had not yet learned how much it could cost, "The gate's the king's, sir. I'd not lay a hand to it." Vane called him a fool and worse and turned away, and Tobin caught my eye for half a second, frightened of what he'd done, and I gave him the only thing the post would let me give. I did not look away. A man learns more from a still face that will not look away than from any speech. The boy stood the rest of the morning at the rail beside my gate, and he stood it straight. "You'll regret this, both of you," Vane said again to no one now to the fog, but the masts had not moved, the tide had not moved. And somewhere up the wet stone, coming down at the unhurried pace of a man who has read the key true for 30 years, was the harbor master, with the morning's writs under his arm and the slow eyes of a man who has weighed 10,000 cargoes and trusts not one of them until it is on his scale. The chain was coming. I had only to hold my link until it did. The harbor master was a man named Aldous Penhale, and if you have ever met a man who has done one thing well for 30 years, you have met someone like him. He came down the wet stone in a black coat gone green at the seams, with a brass-bound ledger under one arm and a pair of spectacles pushed up into gray hair, and he did not hurry, and he did not look at Captain Vane, and he did not look at me. He looked at the barge. He stood at the edge of the quay, and he looked at the barge tied off below my gate, and he looked at it the way I had looked at it, and I watched him see what I had seen. The low ride, the careful trim, the way the lines were made fast, not by men who wanted the cargo handy, but by men who wanted it deep and steady and out of the wind. Penhale looked at that barge for a long, slow moment, and then he took the spectacles down off his hair and put them on, and only then did he turn and look at the man. "Captain Vane," he said, "you're early." "Tide," said Vane with a smile that arrived too fast. "You know how it is, Master Penhale. A captain doesn't choose his hours, the sea does. I've a clean cargo and a short window, and your soldier here won't pass my men through the gate. I'd take it kindly if you tell him his business." "His business," said Penhale mildly, "is to keep that gate shut until the seal is broken by a man with the writ to break it. He's doing his business very well." He did not look at me when he said it, and I did not look at him, but I felt the small warmth of it the way you feel a fire in another room. My business is the writ. So let's have your papers, Captain, and your manifest, and we'll weigh what's in the barge against what's on the page. And if they're the same number, we'll have your gate open inside the hour. The smile on Vane's face did not move, but something behind it did. The manifest's plain enough. Salt and cordage for the inner stores, 40 crates. You can read it off Crew's book. I'll read it off your scale, said Penhale, the way I read every cargo that comes to this stone. Salt weighs a certain weight, Captain. Cordage weighs another. The page can say what it likes. The scale only knows the one thing. He opened his ledger and licked a thumb and turned to a clean page, unhurried, a man with all the tide in the world. Bring up a crate, any crate. We'll start there. I have thought since about the moment Roderick Vane understood that he had walked into a key that would weigh him. It did not show all at once. It showed the way the tide shows on the stone, a wet line creeping up where a moment before there was dry. First the smile thinned. Then the easy hand on the hip went tight. Then he laughed, too loud, and tried the thing that had bought him every key before this one. Master Penhale, he said, and his voice had gone soft and warm and confiding, the voice of one reasonable man to another over the heads of the help. He stepped close to the harbor master and put a hand to his elbow and turned him a little away from me, away from the dockhands, the way a man does when he is about to say a thing he does not want weighed in the open. I could not hear all of it. I did not need to. I have seen the shape of it on that key a dozen times, the head bent, the low murmur, the hand that goes, while the mouth is busy being friendly, to the inner pocket of the coat. I saw Vane's hand go to the inner pocket of his coat. Penhale stepped back out of the warm voice as a man steps back from a wave he has seen come in too many times to be caught by. Put it away, Captain, he said, not softly at all now, loud enough for the stone. Put it away and don't show it to me again, and we'll both pretend I didn't see what your hand was doing, because the day's young and you've a chance yet to land an honest cargo honestly. But if you bring that hand out of that coat with anything in it, I'll weigh that too, and it'll go in the book under its right name. The dockhands had all stopped working now. Even Vane's own crew had stopped. There is a thing that happens on a quay when a powerful man is told no in the open air, and every man within earshot feels it happen, and not one of them will meet his eye, because to meet his eye is to be a witness, and to be a witness is to be in the book yourself. Vane took his hand out of his coat. It was empty. He had thought better of it, not because he had grown honest in the last half-minute, but because he had counted the faces watching and found them too many. So he did what loud men do when the soft hand fails. He reached for the hard one. You'll regret this, both of you, he said, and now he was loud again, the confiding gone, the gold buckle flashing as he turned to take in the whole key, playing to them now, daring them. You think I land my cargoes by the leave of a wax seal and a dockyard clerk in a green coat. I've dined 3 times this month above that wall. The chin again, jerked up at the palace. I've a friend at the board of stores who'd have the pair of you scrubbing barges by spring. You want to weigh my crates? Weigh them. And when you find your salt is salt and your cordage is cordage, you'll have made an enemy of a man who could have made you, and lost nothing for it but your mourning, and I'll see to it you lose a good deal more than that. The clerk and the toy soldier. Remember, I gave you the chance to be reasonable. I will be honest with you about the threat, because the threat is the test, and the test is the whole of the post. It was not nothing what he said. A man who dines above the wall can make trouble for a harbor master, and more trouble for a sentry, who has no green ledger to hide behind and answers up a chain that is long and does not always look down to the bottom of itself to see who is holding the line. I had a wife who liked to know the rent was paid. I had 4 winters on that quay and no wish to lose the 5th. When a man like Vane says he knows people in that house up there, the wise part of you, the tired part, the part that wants to go home, leans toward the gate and whispers, "Let him through. What's it to you, salt or no salt? Let the customs house find it. Let it be somebody else's mourning." That whisper is the real provocation, not the words. The words are only noise. The provocation is the small voice in your own chest that offers you the easy way and calls it sense. And the post, the whole reason there is a post at all, the whole reason they stand a man in wool and brass on a cold wharf before the gulls wake, the post is the answer you have already given to that voice, long before the morning the question comes. You do not decide to hold the gate when the captain threatens you. You decided it years ago, on 100 mornings no one watched, and the threat only asks whether you meant it. I meant it. I came to attention and I kept the gate, and I let Roderick Vane's threat go out over the harbor and lose itself in the fog, the way the gulls crying did, the way everything does that is only noise. Penhale did not even look up from his ledger. Bring up a crate, he said again to no one and everyone. Any crate. Master Crew, you've a tally book and a steady pair of hands. Bring up a crate to the scale. And Crew, the foreman, the broad, slow man who had read the gate true, Crew looked at his captain, and looked at the harbor master, and looked, last of all and only for a second, at me, at the painted post on the King's Gate who had not moved or spoken through the whole of it. And then Foreman Crew set down his book, and went down to the barge, and brought up a crate to the scale. It came up on a sling, swung over by the lean gray crane, and set down on the great brass plate of the key scale with a sound like a coffin going down. Penhale read the weight off the iron arm with the patience of a man reading scripture. He wrote it in the book. He looked at the crate. It was a plain pine crate, well made, with vein burned into the lid and the word salt stenciled below it in honest black letters, and it weighed, Penhale said aloud for the book, near twice what a crate of salt of that size ought to weigh. That's a wet crate, Captain, said Penhale. Salt rides light, this rides like ballast. He set his hand flat on the lid. Or it rides like something that doesn't want to be salt. Open it. Now, while the crate sat on the brass plate and the iron arm hung steady at its damning weight, Vane tried the last thing a cornered man tries, which is to make the proof itself the crime. You'll answer for prying open a private cargo on a public key, he said, loud, working the crowd again because he still believed there was a crowd to work. These crates are sealed against weather and theft. You break that seal, Master Penhale, and any spoilage is on your head, and I'll have the cost of it out of the King's stores and a letter to the board besides. You think a scale gives you the right to a man's property. A scale weighs. It doesn't see inside. For all your iron knows, I've packed my salt in wet sand for the trim, which is a captain's right and no man's business but mine. It was not a bad lie, as lies go. That is what made it dangerous, and that is the part of the morning I want you to understand, because it is the part the loud men are right about, a little, and being right about a little is how they get away with a great deal. A scale does not see inside a crate. The wrong weight is a question, not an answer. A heavy crate of salt might be a heavy crate of salt packed in sand for trim, or wet through from a leaking hold, and an honest captain wronged by a hasty harbor master is a real thing in the world, and the day a key opens every heavy crate on suspicion alone is the day no honest cargo will come to it. Penhale knew that better than any man alive. I watched him know it. I watched the old harbor master stand with his hand on a crate that he was as sure as I was carried something other than salt, and weigh, not the crate now, but the rule. Because the rule is the only thing on a key worth more than the cargo. A man who breaks the rule to catch a smuggler has caught one smuggler and broken the rule, and the rule was protecting 1,000 honest men the smuggler never was. You're right that a scale doesn't see inside, Captain, Penhale said at last, slow, and he did not take his hand off the lid. And you're right that a heavy crate is a question and not a hanging, so I'll not break your seal on my suspicion. I've no leave to, and I'll not take leave I haven't got. Vane's smile came back, the wrong smile, the one that thinks it has found the crack in the wall. And then Penhale opened his ledger to the front of it, where the writs were folded, and drew out one written close in a clerk's hand and stamped with the customs mark, and held it up. But I've a standing writ signed this season that says any cargo for the inner basin, under the King's seal, may be weighed and proved at the gate before it passes, because the inner stores feed the King's house, and what feeds the King's house is looked into, every crate, no man excepted, captain or commoner. You brought it to the inner gate, Captain. You, not me. If you'd run it to the outer wharf, I'd have had no writ and you'd have had your morning. But you were so set on shaming a sentry over the king's own seal that you carried your own cargo to the one gate on this whole harbor where the rule says I open the crate. So I'm not prying. I'm doing precisely what the writ on this page tells me to do, no more, and I'll write that down too." He folded the writ away. "Open it, Captain, or stand there while I do, and let the book say which of us had the steadier hand." I have turned that over many times. Vane was undone by the very thing he came to do. He had 100 quieter ways to land that cargo, and he chose the loudest, because the loudness was the point. He wanted to break a still man over the king's seal in front of the morning, to prove there was no line he could not cross. And in coming to break the line, he laid his crate down on the one stone where the line had teeth. The post had not trapped him. The post had only stood where it was set to stand, and held, and the captain's own contempt had carried him onto the scale. A still man does not have to chase the loud one. He only has to be the thing the loud one cannot leave alone, and wait. "You've no cause," said Vane, but the loud was gone out of it now, gone the way the tide goes, all at once and from under you. "I've the writ," said Penhale, "and the writ is all the cause this gate has ever needed. Open it or I open it, and if I open it the proving's in the book and the book is read aloud at the customs house, and then it's not my morning you've ruined, Captain, it's your own." He took a short iron bar off the scale frame and held it out, handle first, a courtesy. "Open your own crate. It goes easier on a man in the book if he opened his own." I watched Vane take the bar. I watched his hands. A man's hands tell you what his face is still trying to hide, and Vane's hands taking that iron bar were not the hands of a man who thought he carried salt. They were careful. They were slow. He set the bar under the lid and he leaned on it, and the nails came up with a long shriek, the way nails do when a man has set them to stay, and the lid came off, and the morning got very quiet. It was not salt. I will not make a great drama of what it was, because the drama was never the cargo, the drama was the man. But I will tell you plain, the way it went in the book, because the book is where this story truly ends. Under a thin top layer of coarse salt, a hand's depth of it, no more, laid over the top to fool the weight of a man's eye and never the weight of a man's scale. The crate was packed tight with sealed jars of cut spirit and twists of untaxed leaf, and wrapped in oilcloth at the bottom, a quantity of worked silver with no maker's stamp and no bill of sale, the kind of silver that comes off another man's ship in the dark and goes onto your own, and is never weighed by anyone who would write it down. 40 crates of it, riding low under the fog, run ashore in the thin gray hour before the customs house opened, over the king's own gate, past a sentry the captain had been so very sure would do precisely nothing. Penhale looked into the crate a long moment. Then he took up his pen, and in his slow, careful hand, he wrote in the book what it was, under its right name. And then he looked up over the spectacles at Captain Roderick Vane, and for the first time all morning there was something in the old harbor master's face that you might have called feeling. "You called my sentry a painted post," Penhale said. "You called him a toy soldier. You said he'd stand there and do precisely nothing while you ran this over the king's gate." He closed the book. And he did. He stood there and did precisely nothing, except the one thing you never counted on a still man doing. He held the gate. He held it through your shouting and your soft hand and your hard one, and he held it long enough for the scale to do its work. You weren't beaten by a man who moved, Captain. You were beaten by a man who wouldn't. I did not move then either. But I will tell you that I have stood many proud moments on that quay, and not one of them sat as warm in the chest as that one, to be told, by the one man on the wharf whose word weighed anything, that the doing of nothing had been the whole of the doing. After that it went the way these things go, quick and quiet and final. Penhale sent his runner up the wet stone. The runner was the boy Tobin, as it happened, given the errand because his were the fastest legs on the quay, and I watched the lad go up the king's stair 2 steps at a time with the harbor master's note in his fist, and I thought, there is a boy who was offered a captain's wages an hour ago to carry crooked crates, and is now running the king's errand to bring the captain in. The easy way had a wage on it. The hard way had a wax seal and a soldier in a costume and a green-coated clerk, and the boy had chosen the hard way before he knew which way would win. That is the whole of it, in a boy. That is what the post is for, so that a lad on his first winter can see, with his own eyes, that the still men hold, and that holding is not the same as losing. The constables came down at the pace of men who have been waiting a long time for a particular captain to make a particular mistake. There were 4 of them, and the harbor warden himself, and a clerk of the customs house with a fresh ledger of his own, and they did not hurry either, because there was nowhere now for the morning to go but where it was going. They went down the barge crate by crate, and they weighed each one, and they opened each one, and the green-coated clerk wrote down what was in it under its right name, 40 times over, while Roderick Vane stood on the stone he had thought he owned and watched his whole cargo become evidence. He did not speak through it. The loud had gone clean out of him. A man who has spent the morning telling a key that he is too large to be weighed has nowhere to stand when the scale, link by link, weighs him entire. They took Roderick Vane's barge and his ship and his books and his gold-buckled coat into the king's keeping, and they took the captain himself by the elbow, both elbows, with no roughness and no mercy. The friend above the wall, the friend at the board of stores who was going to have us scrubbing barges by spring. When the constables came, that friend was nowhere on the quay, and never came down, because the kind of friend a smuggler buys is exactly the kind of friend who is busy elsewhere on the morning the scale comes out. The case was read out a fortnight later, and the friend's name was not spoken once in it. It went hard for him, the way it goes hard for a man whose own crates have been weighed and written down by a clerk in a green coat. There is no arguing with a book. He lost the ship and the barge to the king's forfeit, and the lease of the 2 warehouses went with the fine, and the gold buckle and the painted name on the stern, which he had wanted so badly for the whole harbor to know, became exactly the thing the whole harbor knew him by, which was not the way he had meant it. They did not break him with a rope or a blow. They broke him with the book with 40 crates weighed true and set down in a clerk's plain hand, and a man broken that way stays broken, because there is no friend above any wall who can lift a written weight off a written page. He left the reach before the spring tides. I never saw him again. I did not need to. The key had weighed him and the weighing held. But that was a fortnight off, and I am ahead of the morning. On the morning they walked him up the stone past my gate. He had been so loud coming down. He went up quiet. But at the gate he stopped between the 2 constables, and he looked at me, really looked, the way he had not bothered to look all morning, when I was only a costume to him, and not yet the man who weighed his life. I do not think he had a thing left to threaten me with. I think he only wanted, the way a beaten man does, to be looked at back, to be one man to another for a second before the door closed on him. So I looked at him. I had nothing to say. The post does not bandy words, and there was nothing the captain needed from my mouth that the book had not already said better. But I came to attention as he passed, the same clean movement, boots together, rifle to the shoulder the way it is done, and I held his eye until the constables walked him on. Not a salute. You do not salute a man going up to answer for 40 crates, but not contempt either. A still man's plain acknowledgment that here had passed a captain who thought the key was his, and found out, in the cold gray hour before the gulls woke, whose it truly was. The gate stayed barred. The seal stayed whole. The tide, which does not argue and does not hurry, went out and came back, and the inner basin took its honest cargoes that day under the king's own seal, weighed and written down, each crate the weight its page said it was. There is a thing they say in the customs house now, since that morning, and Penhill tells it on the new men their first week on the wet stone, so I have heard it told more than once. He says, "The captain came down the quay believing the loud man owns the harbor and the still man is only furniture. And the captain went up the quay in irons, having learned the oldest lesson the sea ever taught a working wharf, that everything which floats will, in time, come to the stone and be weighed, and that the man who keeps the stone is not the furniture. He is the scale's first witness. He is the reason the scale gets its turn. I stood 4 more winters on that gate after Roderick Vane, and then a younger man took it, and I taught him what the key had taught me, which was almost nothing and was everything. Hold your gate. Let the loud men be loud. The sea will not hurry for them, and neither will you. Keep your link of the chain until the next link comes, because the chain is only as good as its quietest man. And the quietest man, on the cold mornings no one is watching, is the whole of why an honest cargo can cross an honest quay at all. They had dressed me up in the wool and the brass and the great furry hat, Vane said, and stood me on a wharf to frighten the seagulls. He was wrong about almost everything that morning, but he was right about the standing. They did stand me there. And the standing, the plain, unglorious, unmoving standing, on a gate at the foot of the King's Stair, in the gray before the day, turned out to be the one thing in the whole loud morning that could not be bought, or threatened, or talked aside, or moved. That is the post. That was always the post. I was proud to keep it, and I am prouder still to have kept it the morning it would have been so easy, and so reasonable, and so very wise to let it go.